My name is Danielle Tran and I'm a Senior Lecturer at Greenwich University, a part of the Educational Development Unit.
Hi, and I'm Martin Compton, also Senior Lecturer in the EDU at the University of Greenwich.
Welcome to this short simulated reflective writing tutorial. This video will talk you through the stages of reflective writing, which we know can be very, very hard. Colleagues in HE, we know the benefits of reflective practice, we know the strengths and the value that can come from writing a piece of good critical reflection to help with our own continuing professional development. But at times, referring to all the different models that are out there, which we'll touch upon in a little bit, sometimes can seem a little bit overwhelming. And when it comes to actually writing our critical reflection, it can sometimes be very description heavy. So this video hopefully will help us to get started with the writing process and to offer a frame from which we can use to help guide our writing so that it is a little bit more evaluative, analytical, and most importantly, critically reflective.
Okay, so as Danielle says, there are a number of frameworks of reflection that you may have come across before, and you might find at a later stage that it's useful to refer to those in your writing or just to inform your wider understanding of what it means to be reflective. You may have heard of the various cyclical models, such as those proposed by David Cole. There's the Gibbs model, or there's the very simple Rolfe and others model, what, so what, and what now. And these might help if you like that sort of continuing cycle or spiral, as some people sometimes represent them. There's also the concept of reflection in and on action, which is Donald Schoen. You may well have come across that. And another one that people find useful to see things from different perspectives is Brookfield's critical lenses approach. But since you're here and those resources are not going to go away, why not give this a go? Because it's designed to help you get beyond the description of the event, whatever it is that you're reflecting on, and to get deeper into it and help you write reflectively. So what is it that you're reflecting on? Well, it could be a teaching session, one where somebody else has observed you, or one where you've observed somebody else, or it could simply be something that you've experienced, maybe what is known as a critical incident. And don't forget, of course, if it is a critical incident, it doesn't have to be something bad, even though that's somehow the word incident is interpreted. It could be some kind of professional practice occasion, a meeting with a client, for example, or any other professionally related activity or study related activity that requires you to look beyond the facts, look beyond the bald description and go deeper into your understanding of why things happened, what the responses were, and how things might evolve or change as a consequence of the reflective process.
You can stop and resume the video, working with the video at any time using the same machine that you're currently working on now. Just remember to not clear the cache. And at the very end of the video, or if you do stop and want to come back to it completely at another time and save your answers for now, then you can do that. Just save your responses before you log off and turn off and move away from your computer. And you can also click on the print icon, which will allow you to obviously print and also save your work as a PDF. And when you click on show your responses, you can also simply copy and paste all of your answers into a Word doc, which you can also save to. Okay, so starting off with the guided simulated video, we're just going to start off simply with describing the event or incident, however way you prefer to call it. And remember, this can be, exactly like Martin said, a single occasion or a series of closely connected related aspects. For example, a teaching session or an aspect of professional practice. So all we're going to ask you to do in this first text box, which is about to appear on screen, is to describe the event. So simply, what's happened? Give a brief outline summary of what happened.
Okay, so now that you've got that brief description of the event, hopefully that will be the limit of the description that you need in order for us to understand the context. But there is another context, and that's the wider context of your professional area or your professional practice and the situation that it's set within. Let me give you a couple of examples. So say, for example, you're reflecting on a session that you've taught, and you've identified an incident in that, and let's say that it's to do with the way in which students are responding to your questions. A lot of teachers find that they ask a question, they get met with a sea of blank faces. Now, it may be that is the incident itself, or it may be something that you're trying to get more out of your students as a consequence of that. Either of those would work. But where does that sit in its broader context? Well, in the context of teaching and learning, it sits within the broader ideas of assessment and feedback. So you might want to relate it to some of those wider concepts, or even more broadly to learning theory. You might want to relate it to cultural factors, to the nature of the student body, the cohort, the types of students who you're working with. Or it might be something completely outside of this, or something related to a professional interaction, the way something worked for you that runs contrary to your wider expectations or norms of practice. So try and place it in its relevant context. What is the wider aspect here that is relevant? So just state very quickly what the sort of broader framing umbrella aspects are to this particular event or incident or occasion.
This third stage to the writing framework that Martin and I have created seems a little bit strange in terms of timing, possibly. And it's because we're asking you now at stage 3 to reflect back on your preparation for the event in question. So now in stage 1, you've already outlined and described the event. In stage 2 that Martin just outlined, you're relating it to connections and wider aspects of theory. Now at stage 3, we're just trying to get you to reflect a little bit further back in time to what it is that you were hoping for initially prior to the event actually occurring. What were you hoping to achieve? What knowledge were you hoping to gain from that particular event? The reasons why we're asking you to focus on these 2 questions, how did you plan and prepare for the event, and why did you prepare in this particular way, is because in order to critically reflect on a deeper level, we must incorporate into our thinking all the different angles that fed into the execution of the event, and this includes our own individual preparation time. So in the next text box, just list down how did you plan for the event and why did you plan in this way. And also a little note, if you feel as if you didn't thoroughly prepare, then try to give some reasons as to why that was.
Let's turn now to the incident or the session or the occasion itself. And let's get right down to the nitty-gritty and focus on you as an individual. We are going to broaden out again in a minute, but try and record here how you felt during and then immediately after that event. And perhaps even now that there's some distance between it ending and you sitting here trying to express your views and your feelings about it. And once you've done that, try and account for those feelings. So for example, let's go back to the example that I gave earlier of the students not answering your questions in a teaching situation. How does that make you feel? Do you feel instantly that they're indolent, that they're lazy, that the responsibility has to lie with them? They should be motivated enough. They paid enough to be here. Why are they not answering these questions? Did you feel instantly the other end of the spectrum? It's all your fault. What am I doing wrong? I must be pitching it too high or asking overcomplicated questions. It's all down to me. Or somewhere in between. What was that instant emotive response? Because that can be really telling about the way that you see yourself, the way that you see your students or whoever it is that you're working with, in whatever setting you happen to be working in. So how did you feel? How do you account for those feelings? Is that next level? Why are you feeling like that? What is it about you that makes you feel in that way? So jot a few things down now.
Okay, now going on from what Martin was just saying about broadening out, so that's what we're going to do in this next stage. So the next stage we're asking you to focus on is what were the responses or feelings of the other people that were involved. So this could be students, it could be colleagues, So if you were reflecting on a teaching session, then you're thinking about the responses and feelings of your students. If you were reflecting on a meeting with staff, an appraisal, then you'll be reflecting on the colleague or colleagues involved and what you think of their responses and their feelings. To keep things streamlined, I'm just going to take on Martin's example before we continue with that. So if you were reflecting on a teaching incident where students weren't responding to your questions in class, then now think about the responses and feelings of those involved amongst the learners. So think about, how do you think they responded? Were they positive? Were they hesitant? Did they seem anxious? Did they seem upset or angry that they weren't understanding the questions? Did they just seem confused and a little bit lost? So note down how you think they were feeling, but then also to go deeper in terms of the level of analysis, how do you know that these were their responses? So what kind of evidence could you draw in, whether formal or informal? Did you receive verbal feedback from those involved? Did a student then say to you, I don't understand this question, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling confused? Or are you basing your analysis of other people's responses and feelings on the body language that others were exhibiting? So in the next text box, just jot down what you think were the responses and feelings of the other people involved, and how do you know this?
Okay, the next prompt relates, I suppose, as a sort of summary of these previous two sections, because what we're asking you to do here is to think about the validity of those responses. So the validity of your own response. Did you react reasonably? Did you overreact, underreact? Was your response appropriate, do you think? And what about their response and their engagement or disengagement or whatever it happens to be? How did they respond, and was it valid? That's the key thing here. And when we're talking about validity of somebody's reactions, this is a really good opportunity to start drawing on theory. Now, we don't want you to do that here, but this might be a place that you mark out as somewhere where you would come back to and support your ideas and analysis with reference to some scholarship.
Now we're going to move into the summary stage, and we're going to focus on the positives and negatives. So in the next text box, all we're asking you to do is to note down very briefly what were the overall positive aspects of the event in question. So what did you think worked really well? What were the strengths of the session, the event, the critical incident that you are reflecting on? And also, what were the weaknesses, the negatives, things that could be developed further? And again, here, as Martin was saying earlier, this is a great time to draw in and refer to relevant scholarship and theory to help ground your response in research.
Okay, and a way of pulling that together might be to try and identify knowledge and skills, or even attitudes, things from the affective side, qualities that you feel as though you've developed or gained. So it could be about you as a person, it could be about you as a professional. It could be about teaching in general or your teaching style. It could be about your professional practice approach or style, whatever it happens to be that you're reflecting on. Of course, we're drawing on a lot of examples of students here because it's our primary interest, but we hope that this is applicable across a wider spectrum. A lot of the theory on reflective practice, incidentally, is developed and related to health practitioners, but it's used a lot in teaching as well. So we hope that there'll be that cross-transferability there. So what have you learnt, and how does this link into the theory of perhaps even theories of learning? Is that experience, people say that experience is the best teacher. Is that the case in this instance? Or do you feel befuddled by the whole thing? Are you left confused? Are you left with a lot of questions unanswered? And that's still a valid position if you can identify what you still do not know or still have not to develop, and it will of course feed into the section after this. So just have a think about what you have learned.
And extending on from that last stage, this next point is asking you to focus more upon the impact of the event. And also we're asking you to revert very briefly back to one of the earlier stages in which you were asked to reflect back on the preparation that was involved prior to the event in question. So for this particular stage, we're asking you, were there any aspects in terms of the way in which you planned and prepared for the event that had a particular impact on the outcome of the event as a whole? And also reflecting back on your preparation and how you thought the event would initially go before the event was actually executed. Now that it's happened, compare those two thoughts. So how close was the way you initially envisaged the event running? How close was that initial imagined thought actually very close to the final execution and delivery of the event itself?
Okay, so we're now moving into what might be termed the action planning stage, and it's very sort of concluding, it's summative, it brings everything together. And this is a useful way of expressing it in a different way. Very often in concluding paragraphs, people are simply restating things that they've said before. But this is a way of re-seeing the whole reflective process by talking about how you might change things. So what we'd like you to do in this next box is to think about what you would do differently given the same circumstances in future, either at the preparation planning stage or at the actual execution, delivery, meeting stage, whatever the focus of your reflection is. So what would you do beforehand? What would you do during that is different?
And again, now moving more broadly into focusing on the importance of encouraging others as well to become more involved within the critical incident. So before, Martin was focusing on what would you do differently, focusing on the person, the individual. This stage now we're asking you to think about what, if anything, would you do to encourage others to do differently if you had the opportunity to execute this particular event one more time. So for example, if you were working with students and students were hesitant in terms of responding to your questions in the classroom, what would you do to encourage them to be able to involve themselves a little bit more? Would you ask more questions? Would you try to get them to work in groups? So if you were working with colleagues, for example, in a different setting, maybe this particular stage may be limited in terms of your amount of response, but still you might be able to think about the types of questions that you might be able to have asked, or the number of questions that you might have been able to use to prompt discussion from your peers and from your colleagues. So in this next text box, just think about what, if anything, would you do to encourage others to do differently?
Okay, well, thank you. Well done for getting to the end. I hope you feel that even if you've just thought about things and not typed anything in the boxes, that this has really helped shape your thinking. But hopefully you have typed some responses to our question prompts. And what you can do now is once this video finishes, you will see a Show My Responses option on the left-hand side of the screen. Click on that and you can get all the prompts and your responses on screen to review. If you wish, you can select that, copy it, paste it into a document, and use the responses as a basis for a piece of reflective writing. Though you will, of course, need to bring in some further scholarship if this is for an assessment of some kind. Alternatively, you can click on the print button, and that gives you the option, of course, of printing if your machine is connected to a printer, or a saving as a PDF, which might be a useful thing to do as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and good luck with your writing.